I thought to myself, like, what is actually happening to me right now? Especially while in the middle of a meditation. And the answer is nothing. Nothing is happening to me right now. Most of what people are looking for is to be held by themselves, by their family, by their friends, by their community. But when you find yourself acting in those ways that you might perceive as low vibrational, I think it opens up this portal in a way to understanding other people. I just finished meditating and I journaled about it after, and I really felt like I should share this. I felt like it would be helpful to other people as well. The meditation I did was just a quick 10-minute meditation, and it was, I think, about clarity specifically, but it wasn't really that deep of a meditation. At one point in the meditation, she said to like ask yourself a question. If you have a question for yourself, ask. And I felt this question naturally come up to me, which was, how do I become my best self? I feel like, a lot of us are on this self-healing, self-help, work on yourself journey. At least I have been for a while. And the question just came very clear to me to just be. And I know that it seems like such a simple answer, but in that moment, I still felt like some calm wash over me, in that it seemed like everything clicked and everything made sense in that moment. I started thinking about how much we overthink in this world, how much, you know, time we spend thinking about situations that have already happened. And I thought to myself, like, what is actually happening to me right now? Especially while in the middle of a meditation. And the answer is nothing. Nothing is happening to me right now. Nothing is going on right now in this moment. And while you may have things going on in the background, that doesn't mean that you have to divert your attention to what's going on in the background of your life. You can just be here right now for this moment, and accept that, just being is enough. Just being here, just being in the present is enough. And I had read The Power of Now about like 2 years ago, and I still felt like it was a really helpful book to me. So I was also in the process of rereading it. And I understand the book in that, like, it very much focuses on, like, most of your suffering comes from not being in the present moment. And I felt like while I understood it, while I was reading it, it wasn't until I was in that moment feeling it that it made sense. So I'm just going to go ahead and read my journal. I feel like while I am really good at channeling, it's a lot harder for me to like channel, I guess, to the camera or just verbally, unless it's like right there in that moment. And I'm not in that moment where I was when I was writing this. I immediately ended my meditation and jumped into journaling. And even there, it was like, it felt like I was losing the words that I was getting as I was trying to write it down, but eventually I was able to make it come back. So I'm just going to read this. I wrote that I did a clarity meditation and very clearly got the download to stop thinking. Most suffering comes from thinking, not living. The events that happen are neutral, but the stories we project on them are not. What is actually happening right now? I just am. The meditation said to ask myself a question. The first question to come up was, how do I become my best self? And clear as day, I heard the answer to just be. It really is that simple. I don't need to move at some specific pace or use my problem-solving brain to think about every situation in my life. I don't need to constantly remember things from the past or try to make sense of the past. Some things just are. While it may not always seem like things are working out, everything is in divine order. I don't like AI, but I recently asked how to get over that life isn't fair, and the step that stood out to me the most was that unfairness is, at least it seems, evenly distributed or random. It's not for any person, it's not personal in any way, it's just the way the world is. But also, who am I to judge unfairness in my life when I can easily say life is unfair to so many? I hate to be that person, but God only gives us what we can handle, and oftentimes these situations were placed in our lives to make us stronger. You can decide to crumble or rise up, and God loves you either way. The story being written isn't even over yet, so why not wait to see how good it gets? What if this needed to happen to help you become who you want and who the world needs? To be more compassionate and understanding, or to inspire someone else's growth as well. But it's not even up to you to think, plan, or understand, especially on such a grand scale. You can just trust, you can just surrender. You can just accept that everything is going according to plan. That doesn't mean that you won't feel pain or loss or rejection or sadness, but you get to witness your feelings and decide how long you want to be upset about something. How long do you want to hold that pain before accepting that it's not personal? Most times you are just tending to your ego because your future self or your higher self has already accepted it and moved on and moved into love, forgiveness, joy, and into a stable state of being. You get to decide how long you take to alchemize that pain. But again, most of the pain left over is mental or psychological. You only have to be and sit with these feelings as they arise. The more familiar you are with something, the quicker you seem to be at letting it go. When you know which trauma it's replaying, the more light it sheds on that which needs to be held. And in that part, I accidentally wrote held, but I meant to write healed. And so I also think that that's a funny coincidence. It made me think of healing a bit differently, in that it's really about holding myself. There's the belief that we signed contracts with people before we came here to heal certain aspects of ourselves. If you look at it through that lens, could you one day be grateful for what someone or something helped you become, face, or change? I've struggled with forgiving people who hurt me and the situations I felt they put me in. I have the anger from my ego telling me that I deserve better. My ego is valid in feeling that way, and I thank it for trying to protect me from that pain. Yet I know it is inevitable. I thank my higher self for operating out of unconditional love and understanding that another's actions towards me is a reflection of them and where they are. While people can hold up mirrors to what needs to be worked on, their actions are not a reflection of my worth. I also accept it's possible for all of my feelings to exist at once. I forgive others as I hope for others to forgive myself. And even under the belief that I would never do some of the things done to me, I would hope to be able to be forgiven for acting out in such ways due to my own pain. Sometimes others will inflict their hurt onto you, but you do not need to take it on. Heal yourself from these situations in the ways they might not be able to. It doesn't mean to forget or to trust these people or things in your life. You still have to do what's best for you and protect what's most precious, which is you. But you don't have to move through the world fearfully. You only attract what is needed in your life for your growth. And if you fully trust the universe, then you know you have nothing to fear. You will never look stupid for being open, loving, and trusting. You just need to trust your intuition and practice discernment. So that's what I wrote. Some things that I wanted to expand upon. In the part where I said that God only gives us what we can handle, and oftentimes these situations were placed to make us stronger. As someone who has gone through difficult emotions and things, I have often had the feeling rise up of, why do I have to be strong? Why do I have to be resilient? Like, even in therapy, I've asked, like, or said, I'm tired of being resilient. I'm tired of being strong. But when you think about what would be the opposite of that, which is, falling after each of these situations try to bring you down, crumbling and succumbing to these painful situations and acting out of pain, you become no better than the situations or people that inflicted these pain onto you. And in the part where I said that I feel like it helps you become a more compassionate and understanding individual, I can definitely say that earlier in my journey, I felt a lot more judgment towards others for how they were choosing to live or things they were choosing to do or say. In that, like, why can't everybody work on themselves? Why can't everybody be a better person? Why doesn't everyone want to change, want to heal? But I don't think it's that people don't want to, it's that it's hard. And you genuinely feel that hardness yourself when you're going through those situations. And I think in some ways that can allow you to be more empathetic to the people that put you through these situations, because they might not be strong enough to build themselves up and heal from these situations. But you are. And it may not feel that way in those moments when you're feeling all of that pain and hurt and torment. And, you might be asking, why God? Why the universe? Why me? Why whatever? But when I look at it through the lens that it is making me stronger in these situations, and it's making me a stronger person, so that way I don't put these situations onto other people, I think just being that one person in the world, and typically you're not the only person in the world, but even if it's just within your own life that you feel like you're the only person trying to make that change, I feel like by proximity, the people that are around you are still watching you. They're still seeing you. And they might be sitting around wondering, well, I know she went through XYZ, or he, or they. um, and it's like, oh, well, how did they get through that? How did they change? How did they still come out a better person, a happier person? And I don't know that you know the full story of what somebody else is going through, especially without talking to them. But I think in a way it gives hope that even through all of the things that you go through in your life, you can still overcome them. And so sometimes you may just be in this life, in this world, to show others that healing is possible. It doesn't mean it's not hard, it doesn't mean that it's easy, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible either. I think it just takes time. And in the part where I said that I feel like the more you go through something, the easier it gets, I feel like I recognize that to be true because I've had a lot of situations where I felt like I was betrayed by other people. And I felt myself feeling much more angrier in the first times these situations happened to me. Whereas by the time the third, fourth, fifth time the situation happened to me, I felt myself detach more so. That doesn't mean that I didn't feel myself trying to bring up this story of like, oh, everybody does me dirty, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, nobody understands me, the typical mumbo jumbo that goes through your mind. Um, but even with that, I eventually get to a better place. I think that it's okay for me to admit that I need to wallow a bit and I need to be dramatic a bit for a day or two or three or a week or whatever is necessary before I come back to that original state of being me, of being calm, of being understanding, of being loving. You know, I often ask myself in these situations, like, do I really want to let someone or something take me out of character, take me out of who I am? And obviously, the answer each time is no. I don't want to be changed by the world. I want to be me. I want to be open, happy, loving, and accepting, and find like minded people. I think that it takes time because everybody is growing and going through their own situations. But especially with how young some of us are, I think it's easier to understand that, like, you still have so much life ahead of you. You still have so many more people to meet, so many more people to love, so many more people that you will meet in your life that might be more loving and understanding. And it took them going through their own situations and their own healing for them to be able to show up and be the person that you need in your life. That doesn't mean that they don't have a sketchy past and that maybe they treated people in the past poorly, but maybe it was by seeing people heal from these situations or deciding to overcome these situations and heal that they became a better person. I know that there's a lot of saying like, oh, well, people don't change, but I think to some degree, some people can. That doesn't mean that everyone will, but I think that we're all capable of it. And that doesn't mean that there won't be times where old versions of yourself try to come back up or try to react instead of, you know, responding from the place where you are now. And I feel like when that happens, I at times have felt almost like embarrassment for regressing to a state of how I once was. And again, I feel like it just brings up more empathy and compassion for people when they act out in the ways that they do. Because even if I am someone who is constantly working on healing myself and I still find myself regressing at times, imagine somebody else who may not be as far in their journey regressing. I imagine it's hard for them as well. I imagine it brings up shame and guilt for them as well. And maybe not in the same degree if they haven't progressed as far in their spiritual journey, but I think that most of the time people know when they're doing something wrong. And I find that some of the issues I have with people is like trying to guide them to like understanding how they might have hurt me or understanding how something they did might have hurt somebody else or might not have been the best thing, etc. But again, like that's all judgments from my perspective of how I choose to live my life. And that doesn't mean that everybody is going to choose to live their life the same way as you. But when you find yourself acting in those ways that you might perceive as low vibrational, I think it opens up this portal in a way to understanding other people. You know, they, as the other part that I said, where people say that like situations or people can be reflections. I feel like at first I was like, oh, how is this person reflecting me? And I would try to be like understanding in that, oh, is this reflecting, do I have this same negative, again, a projection, but do I have this same negative way of acting as what I'm perceiving? And in some cases, that might be the case. But in other cases, I think it's more so to hold up a reflection to what still needs healing. You might not act in the way somebody else acts, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't reflect something else that needs to be worked on within you. And it's up to you to take on that responsibility. It's up to you to decide if you want to change. And I think that that's one of the like beautiful parts of life, is having this free will to decide who you want to be. In what I was saying about overthinking or overanalyzing, you spend so much time trying to understand and accept things. And I'm speaking to myself when I say this, but in those moments where I truly surrender to God's higher plan, to zoom out my perspective of just me in my life and look at the perspective of the whole world, it's a lot easier to understand that unfairness, or what I perceive to be unfair, is really truly random. Like, what if it's really just a game of dice and they're like, oh, this person's getting screwed over today, but it doesn't mean like, oh, poor that person, oh my God, how could this happen to them? And it doesn't mean that it's not sad whatever happened to them, but tomorrow or 5 minutes later, something bad is happening to somebody else. And when you look at the situations that you've gone through, it doesn't mean that you're not experiencing pain and that it's not hurtful. But when you start to be accepting that, oh, wait, there are other people who have really bad situations in their life as well, I think it gives a bit more perspective. And I know that it gets like annoying when people say things about other things going on in the world. Like, I'm just going to use a lower tier, in my opinion, of what's going on in the world. That's not to say it's not important, but climate change, for example. I could sit here and be like, oh, I'm so sad so and so did such and such to me. But the planet is literally dying. Like, on the other grand scale of things, like, is this really the most unfair thing to happen in the world? What is unfair to the earth is all of the pollution and toxins that we're putting into the world. What's unfair is that we are all constantly consuming microplastics. Like, there's a lot more unfair things in the world. And I think it gets easy to get caught up in that sadness and be like, oh my God, there's so many horrible things going on in the world that, oh, like, I can't believe it. And then your heart starts to ache and you start to feel the sadness. And, I feel like at times it's forced me to question my relationship with God and be like, oh God, how could you let these things happen? But again, when I decide to trust that God is an all-knowing power, that God has a greater plan than what I could ever know or understand, it's not for me to question what's going on. It's not for me to ask why. It's not for me to understand or know. I just have to be. And when I take that pressure off of myself of trying to solve all of the world's problems, or trying to solve all of the problems of all of the people in my life, or even trying to solve all of my problems in a short period of time, I think it allows for this room of being like, wait, I can just live. I don't have to constantly be thinking. I don't constantly have to be worrying. I struggle with anxiety myself, so it gets very hard to pull myself back when I start getting into these cycles of ruminating and overthinking. But it feels really good whenever I'm able to come back to me. It feels really good whenever I remember who I am, why I'm here, and that I don't need to know everything or do everything. And when the world starts to feel like all too much, I can remember that. I can just be still. And I know that like a lot of people preach meditation, but I don't think people would preach meditation if it didn't work. And I don't even have to meditate every day to see the difference that it's made in my life. I can meditate every other day. I can meditate once in a week. And even still, that doesn't mean that every single meditation I have is like some transformational thing. But allowing myself to be still in those moments, allowing myself to clear my thoughts in those moments, that is like monumental in my mind, especially as someone who is a chronic overthinker, to be able to just sit and stop for even just 10 minutes, even just 5 minutes. Shoot, there's even 3 minute meditations. I'm sure there's probably even 1 minute meditation. Just taking the pressure of the world and your life off of yourself, even just for a moment, and just being still, it feels transformational. And I feel like having even pets, like see my cats, they sleep all day. Like they're not watching TV, they're not smoking, they're not drinking, they're not going to the club, whatever. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do those things. I just mean that like, and they still seem pretty happy. I don't think that we need more to be happier. I think actually we need less. I think a lot of our unhappiness comes from everything else. All of the food, all of the people, all of the different jobs, money, thoughts, health, the government. Like all of those things going on is what seems to add a lot more chaos into our life. And I find like other people making like light jokes about it, like, oh, we should have never left the caves. But in some degree, I think we are right. I don't think it's that we should have stayed in caves and been cavemen forever. I think that as smart as we are, we're constantly looking to solve the next problem. And that is what our brain is for. It is here to problem solve. But to some degree, it seems like a lot of people in that process became very self-serving. It wasn't just like, oh, what can I do for my community? What can I do for all the people around me? And that doesn't mean there aren't any people like that. There are. But there's also a lot of people like, what could make my life better? Just me. What can make me richer? What can make me healthier? And I feel like, it's a balance of trying to understand like what is helpful and what is greedy. I think that a lot of the inventions that we've had in this world have been extremely helpful in advancing our society. But I do also believe that in some ways it's been completely debilitating. Like, I love my phone, and I don't mean that in like a weird way. Like, you can text people, you can call people, you can be on social media, you can play games, you can travel all around the world through your phone, really, if you want to watch travel vlogs or whatever. You can hear other people's thoughts and opinions, you can find other like-minded people. And I think that when we first created these outlets, it was to foster that sense of, you know, solidarity and, forming a community, even if it's online. But along the way, we started getting caught up in how other people were perceiving us and how they thought or felt about us. And then we started putting out more of a fake persona of like what our life actually is. And I think that along the way, people started to be more happy to see like realness. And I feel like, that was something we saw during TikTok a lot, like people talking about their mental illnesses or their neurodivergency or, just funny but maybe not so funny story times of things that have happened in people's lives. And I think that that realness is what helps balance it out. As much as you could say that phones are bad in that like people are addicted to them, they can't put them down, they're constantly checking their notifications, they feel like the need to be somebody other than who they are to be likable. But on the other end of that is like, oh, but you can find a real community. It's not always like that. And so, I don't know, there's a lot of laws of the universe, and one of the laws that I constantly come back to is also the law of duality. And I feel like it's possible to find good and bad in every situation. And that's not to be one of those crazy optimists to be like, oh, you just need to look at it from the bright side, glass half full. But in some ways you do. And I feel like that's why there's even like the whole delusion trend of being delulu. And they're like, oh, being delusional is what led me to having my dream life. I think it's because it's not about being delusional. It's about having this unrelenting faith and trust that everything is working out for you. If that's delusional, then yeah, it's a really great thing to be delusional. But most of the time, I don't think people are being delusional in a bad way unless it's surrounding a negative circumstance. But I think that people are being delusional nowadays because why shouldn't I believe in my dreams? Even coming at it from the aspect of an abundance mindset. Like, there's enough for everybody. You can be that filmmaker, you can be that writer, you can be that poet, you can be that YouTuber, you can be that fashion designer, you can be whatever you want. And I think that when we have so many other things acting on us saying, oh, that's too hard, or it's impossible, or you'll be broke, or you'll be struggling, whatever, it is all those negative thoughts that cloud our belief. But if you ask a 5-year-old what they want to be when they grow up, they're going to say, like, I want to be a princess, I want to be an astronaut. Because nobody's really crushed their dreams yet. No one has told them that they couldn't do it. And so imagine if you were that person in your life. Imagine if you were the one that said, you can do this, you can get through this. And I feel like that brings me back to the part of my journal where I accidentally wrote held instead of healed. I think most of what people are looking for is to be held by themselves, by their family, by their friends, by their community. And I think when you find that, it automatically makes you better, happier. And you don't have to wait for somebody else to be that for you. You can be that for yourself first, and then have those other people or that community come into your life later. I think it's as cheesy as it is, you have to be the change you want to see in the world. And a big part of that change comes from internally. And so to bring it back around to my original situations, because I know I went on a ramble tangent, when you feel hurt by something, your feelings are valid. And you can feel hurt as long as you want to, as long as you need to. But you shouldn't stay there. You shouldn't want to stay there. And you shouldn't want to inflict that pain on other people. I've had my trust broken, and then I've thought, oh, I never want to trust anyone ever again. I should just be alone. But who does that hurt but me? That only hurts me. That only affects me. And sure, I could say maybe that affects some other people, but for the most part, it affects me. Why would I subject myself to loneliness out of the fear of being hurt by somebody else? If somebody else hurts me, once again, that's a reflection on them. That doesn't mean that I wasn't loving, caring, kind, trusting, etc. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt when it happens. But it does mean that you didn't do anything wrong. And I feel like when these situations happen, it's easy to blame yourself and feel like, oh, I should have known better, or I should have cut them off a while ago, or I should have done this, or I should have said that. But there really isn't a should. Because once again, when you come to this place of acceptance and understanding and trusting in the universe, everything was happening exactly as it was supposed to. I had a card come out for me when I gave myself a reading, going through a tough time. And it was the Divine Perfection card. And they were like, why would you think the universe would want to hurt you? Why would you think that the universe would want to tell you no, would want to take away situations that were meant for you? That doesn't sound very love and light and like the universe is. So you have to genuinely ask yourself, like, if the universe is always doing what's best for me, if everything is always working out for me, if God loves me, then even when bad things happen, and again, bad is up to subjectiveness, doesn't that mean it's still working out for me? Doesn't that mean God still loves me? Doesn't that mean I should still trust? But I think in those moments, in a way, not that the universe wants to test us, but in a way it is like a test of your trust, a test of your faith. And I think the better you get at holding on to your trust and your faith and your belief in God and love in these hard situations, the stronger you are, but also the better your life gets, because you realize the things that are happening in the world aren't personal and aren't aimed at targeting you and to hurt you, but to make your life better, to make you a better person. I think that most people can at least relate to the idea of like having their heart broken. And you at some point probably have gone through a bad breakup. Now looking back years later, could you not see how that was for you? And I mean, like, maybe for some people you can't. Maybe you're like, no, that still shouldn't have happened. They still shouldn't have done that to me. Like, that was the worst heartbreak I ever experienced. Well, how did that serve me? And maybe it doesn't make sense right now, but that doesn't mean that it won't eventually. Because I can tell you, when I was heartbroken, I was like, oh my God, I've lost the love of my life. I'll never love again. I'll never be happy again. And yes, I'm fortunate in that I am in love again. But that took time. And that took a lot of healing on my part, and accepting that that person wasn't for me in the ways that I thought that they were. That doesn't mean that I love them any less. That doesn't mean that they weren't deserving of my love during that time. But it does mean that God knew I deserved more or different. I can't even say that, because I know sometimes it's easy to say, like, oh, I deserved more, I deserved better, but really what you deserved was just different. Because that doesn't mean that that person won't be what somebody else needs, but that does mean it was no longer what you needed. And then I could say the same for a job. If you've lost a job, it's like, how is that serving me when I now have to struggle and think about where my food's going to come from, or etc. But not to be in the what if realm, but you could what if it in that, what if things got worse at your job? What if the people there weren't treating you well? What if the work you were doing was stopping you from doing the work you needed to do? What if the work you were doing was bad for the world and you needed to be doing something better or different? What if that position was needed even more so by somebody else because you are needed somewhere else? You can play this what if game in a positive way too. You don't have to also always do it in this negative way of like, now I'll never have a job, now I'll be broke, now no one will hire me, now what if I can't, what if you can't? You can play that game. And I feel like I often play what I call the game devil's advocate. What if I never get a job that I like again? But does that even sound reasonable in the respect of the entire world? Like, there's so many jobs out there. There's so many things you haven't tried. And I don't know. There's different situations for everyone. But I say this as someone who has done a lot to retrain my mind out of thinking from a negative way, that things are going the way that they're supposed to go. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. And even if that place doesn't feel the happiest or the best right now, that doesn't mean that it's not gonna work out in the long run. And I feel like there's so many inspirational stories out there that could easily help you understand that. Like, there's so many rags to riches stories. And that's just in the money realm. There's also so many love stories out there. Oh yeah, my first husband, he cheated on me and he had a baby on me and he did this and he kicked me out of the house or whatever. And then it's like, oh, but then I fell in love with his best friend and he took me in and blah blah blah. Like, it could be any story. You don't know why God is putting you in the position that they're putting you in. But that doesn't mean you should stop trusting that it's not where you need to be. And so I say all this to say that you're exactly where you need to be. And even if it doesn't feel that way right now, I think one day, or I shouldn't even say think, I believe one day you will feel that and you will truly believe it yourself, that everything was happening the way that it was supposed to all along. I think of myself as some grand unfolding, and if you're the greatest present that God could ever give you, you're constantly peeling back these layers of wrapping paper, and eventually you get to this core of who you are. And I think as you peel off the layers of other people's projections, of childhood trauma, of current trauma, of the world's drama, I think as you continue to peel back those layers, you find out who you really are, and that's really what you're here for. You know, I constantly hear the quote that we're not here to transcend out of this planet, but to descend further into who we are. And each time that you are hurt, you get the opportunity, you get a portal open to you to allow you to descend fully into who you are outside of other people's projections and ideas, and even outside of the things you've taken on within yourself. So I thank you for being here today. For those of you who also made it to the end, thank you. And I hope these words helped you, transformed you. I know that as I was writing these things, I felt myself healing as I was channeling these words. I felt as if God was speaking to me directly, which is why a lot of it is written in third person. Is that third person? But I think that I wanted to share this message because it felt important, and I felt like this was something that I needed to hear and know as well. And I hope that this reaches who it was meant to reach. For that, thank you.